chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skill to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Does my microphone work? Yes. Excellent news. So thank you for joining us tonight. Oops, there's a little bit of feedback, which I'm assuming is going to go away. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation with the incredible Allison Kirkby, who is this wonderful person here, sat across from me. Now, Allison is the chief executive of BT. She was also a former colleague of mine way back when at P&G. So we both started there. We were both in the reunion last week. I'll come on back to that just briefly. But Allison has gone on to do some absolutely incredible things. I should say two things. She's been working since the age of 12, and she never went to university. So I'm going to say those things up front about Allison, but she's going to share more with you. In addition to being the CEO of BT, she was the CEO of Telia, which is the biggest telecoms company in Sweden and the Baltics. And then she was group CEO of a couple of other telcos before that, whose names escape me.
They all start with a T.
They all start with a T. There you go.
Yeah. Tele2, TDC, Telia, and now BT.
There you go.
There's always a T.
There's always a T. And then she's also worked in a number of other industries. She worked at Guinness. She worked at Virgin Media. And she, by her background, is in finance. So she's a remarkable individual with a fabulous story. And I hope my mic will stop echoing. But let's start. So the first question is quite simple. Give us the romp through your career to date, the highlights and maybe a low light if you feel like it.
Yeah. So yes, I did start working at 12, grew up in a very working class Glaswegian household where you were taught to get an education and get a job. And I started selling fresh cream round the doors of Glasgow via the Cream Boy service. At the age of 12, and became very successful because there was a lot of old elderly men used to answer the door on a Saturday morning and were very happy to find a little girl as opposed to a little boy selling cream. I then became an Avon lady and was managed to outsource that to all of my family members who worked in factories. I was registered under my father's name because I was only 14. And you had to be 18 to be a registered rep, and he was the one that was at home the night that I was signed up. So Mr. Angus Fox was a very successful Avon sales lady in Glasgow. I left school at the age of 17, was planning to go to university. My father unfortunately took terminally ill that summer, and my plan was to build on my maths and physics skills, but actually learn languages because I really wanted to travel. I didn't want to end up working in a factory like my parents did and live in Glasgow in the rain for the rest of my life. And so I always had a dream that through work and travel, I could achieve just so much more. Delayed going to uni by a year because my father was in the process of dying, and discovered that I actually really enjoyed working. And I worked in bars and clubs in the evening. I was a waitress, and was working in a small insurance office when I thought, you know what, it'd be great if I could find a job that allowed me a profession, like everybody had told me at school that I needed to get. But also so taught me a profession whilst I was working and earning. And I discovered that the Scottish whisky industry used to take on 2 school leavers a year, one in the west of Scotland, one in the east of Scotland, as apprentices to become trainee management accountants. So In 1985, at the ripe old age of 18, I became the West of Scotland trainee accountant in United Distillers, which then was acquired by Guinness. I then was morphed into their management training scheme, spent 5 years there, got an HND in accounting by going to college 1 day a week, became a CIMA qualified management accountant. And then after 5 years there, decided it was really time to look beyond that. And I had studied about P&G, and I had P&G, it was a recruit from within. Everybody started straight from university, unless you were in finance, where they brought in qualified accountants or qualified scientists in R&D. So I managed to get in to an open evening they were having in Edinburgh, and that was the start of then a 20-year career at Procter & Gamble. They taught me everything I know. P&G, because it is promote from within, is moving you around all the time, challenging you to develop and grow your leadership skills. So I spent my first 5 years in the UK. In 1990, met my husband there. He was the DAS brand manager. I was the flash cleaning financial analyst. We were set up to have a very clean household. He's still very good at detergents. And in 1995, we always wanted to go abroad. We wanted an international experience. And so in 1995, we went out to Bucharest, Romania. And we spent 3 years there helping set up P&G's Balkan operations. It was between the Bosnian and Kosovan wars. The head of sales was shot at outside a hotel I was in Sofia. I discovered our distributor was paying off the mafia. You know, you're going to talk about resilience later. You learn a lot in an environment like that. Then my husband left P&G. He came back to the UK in 1998. I came back, and then I did another few different assignments. I became the first Western European homegrown CFO for the UK business, which was the biggest business outside of America at that time. And then my CEO there spotted something a little bit different in me, and the finance community spotted something different in me, and they gave me this opportunity to head up investor relations and M&A, but based out of Europe. So I did a couple of years doing that, but got the exposure to people like A.G. Lafley, an amazing leader, helping him prepare for financial results. And whilst doing that, my old CEO was head of global hair care, and he suddenly realized that they'd bought Wella. Wella was a professional business. You had to sell to hairdressers. And he looked at all his management team and he said, there's a lot of people in P&G just do not connect with hairdressers. I reckon you could, Allison. Would you like to be the managing director of Wella? So after 16 years in finance, I actually ran the Wella hairdressing business for my final 4 years. And then after 20 years, it's like, you know what, it was really time to move on. I'd seen some of my peers, Jeremy Darroch, who was the very successful CEO at Sky, move on to run Sky. And I thought, well, why can't I be like Jeremy? And so I started to look at opportunities. I ended up at Virgin Media. So in 2010, left P&G, and then that was the start of what has become a 15-year career in telecoms and media companies. Virgin Media, I then worked at 21st Century Fox for a couple of years. And then after failing to become the CFO of Man United in 2013, and having negotiated with my husband that I would live in Manchester during the week and come home to Windsor at the weekend, but I didn't get on with the Glazers. The next opportunity that came along was to be the CFO of this challenger telecoms company in Sweden. So in 2014, went to become the CFO of Tele2 in Sweden. 15 months later, became the CEO. And that's been the start of what has now been a 10-year period. And this is my 4th CEO-ship in a telecoms company. I'm bringing all my lessons to bear in the first telecoms company that was ever built in the world, which is BT. And it's been an amazing journey. I've sat on a couple of boards. I was on the board of, I was on the board of Greggs, the bakers. I want to Greggify BT, and moved on to the board of BT in 2019. And actually, that's what gave me the opportunity to become the CEO, which I started doing as of February last year.
Right.
So
Well,
that's
there's
my career journey. The highs and lows, lots of highs in P&G, some lows in the media industry.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the times I realized that talent was only creative talent. It wasn't talent that became from other things. And, you know, lots of amazing experiences along the way.
Yeah, sure. No, well, there's a lot of attributes that surface there through your stories. So resilience, drive, sort of a relentless curiosity to explore new things, all of that. But how would you describe your leadership style? And certainly you've had a huge amount of international experience, not just UK experience. And of course, your early days as the Avon lady and cream seller of Glasgow. How would you describe that, and how has it been shaped by those different cultures?
So there's how people perceive my leadership, and then there is how I perceive my leadership. So I think the chair of Greg's was asked to comment on me on the day I was announced as the incoming CEO of BT. And he referred to me as feisty, fun, and fearless in equal measure. Which is, I think, and Richard, who works in my team, is here, and you can ask him later. So what really drives me is the leadership skills that I built at P&G. And they teach you the 5 E's of leadership: envisioning, energizing, engaging, enabling, and executing. And I think where I aim to excel is setting a very clear, ambitious, and compelling vision, and engaging deeply into the organization to take the organization on the journey with me by understanding them and what they need to serve our customers better. And then I really do try to energize along the way. So I'd say I excel at the envisioning, the engaging, and the energizing. And, you know, I often get feedback as I can be a very demanding leader, setting very, very tough targets and messaging in meetings. But because I think I have a lot of EQ, I always try to inject humor and fun and deep engagement into some of these tougher conversations, so that people know that, you know, it's tough. We've got to do some tough things together, and I can have those direct conversations, but I always make sure before people leave the room that they feel good again. So that ability to switch between the tough messaging and the injecting humor to kind of engage and show that you understand is part of a hallmark of mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Greg's chair description was pretty good.
Yes.
Probably he would not have called you, we'll come on to that, feisty if you were a man, but I don't know.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But we'll come on to that. But I think feisty it speaks to that you know, ability to get to the core of things and not let them go and be ambitious.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing that you've mentioned is the engaging of everybody in the execution.
Yes.
Right. And you know, that wandering around, talking to people, being visible.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that have to do the executing ultimately. Yeah. And do you think that's a bit unusual in the size of organization that you're in now?
Yeah, it's certainly, it's something I learned to do a lot of in Sweden, having spent 10 years there, because they, you know, very big into equality, there's less hierarchy. But I think because I learned through doing, I learned through working my way up through the organization, I still learn. My learning is through people and spending time with people. And so I am an extrovert. I hate having to sit on my own for periods of time, thinking, contemplating. I get energy and creativity and everything from spending time with the people, with our people. And so I think it's just naturally, I learn by doing, I learn through being, and that just helps give me great insights. But it is true that in some of the organizations I've led, they've not been used to having a leader like me. So, you know, what in the old BT office, and we have an ex-BT employee here, there was a special lift for the chairman and the executive committee. So they didn't share, and it only held 2 people in it. And so they didn't even go in the elevator with the other people. And that was only back in 2020. When I joined the board, I was whisked up to that floor. So it wasn't. So still today, when I'm in an elevator, my classic was in Sweden. And one day I was in an elevator, and as you can see, I dressed very casually. And this guy got into the lift, and he kind of looked at my shoes, and he looked at my top, and he looked, oh, it's you. I thought it was one of the maintenance. So there is still, you know, there are a lot of very down-to-earth leaders like myself. I think that human centricity is coming into CEO-ship more now. But, you know, when you have to change an organization of the scale of BT, you have to deeply understand the people that you're taking on that journey with them. And you have to do that by spending time out where the real jobs are done. When I became the CEO of Tele2 back in September 2015, I was promoted over the course of a weekend. And there was a number of people as peers that were disappointed that I was chosen and they weren't. And by Christmas, 3 or 4 of them had decided to leave. And it was when I called my chairman up after the 4th one had resigned and said, I'm really sorry, Mike, but I've now had a 4th resignation. And he went, Allison, that's terrible. I've never known a leader lose 4 executives in 4 months. And I thought, oh God, this is really not good. It's not going to go well. And he went, but you know what? You guys think you run the company, but you could all disappear for 6 months. And the company would be absolutely fine, because it's the people in the organization that are really running the company for you. And they're the ones that you need to spend time with, because they're the most important.
Well, that's a good lesson.
And it was a very good lesson. Yeah. He was one of my references when I became the CEO at BT. And his advice to me coming back to the UK was, don't hang out with the media. Don't hang out with politicians, hang out with your customers and your colleagues, and you'll be great. And I think that's something we'll all need to take a lesson from.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it sounds like he gave you some excellent advice. Now we've heard about your own humble beginnings and how you persisted, and obviously through your experiences got to where you are, which is a great social mobility story, really. Now, how are you ensuring that that kind of opportunity is available to everybody else? What do you think we should be doing? Because I have read somewhere, and I cannot remember where, that the UK is one of the least socially mobile countries.
Yes.
So what's your view on that sort of?
As a result of my own background, I am a big believer and proponent in apprentices. And, you know, considering BT is almost a microcosm of the UK, I fundamentally, I always believe in a service-oriented business like ours. Your customer base has to be as diverse, your colleague base, and has to be as diverse as the customers you serve. And so BT, you know, it's a privilege to run a company that has always believed in diversity in its broadest sense, not gender diversity, not just ethnicity, also disablement, ex-veterans. We have a very, very high representation in all of those. But of course, with my background, I really believe in the power of the apprenticeships. We are, I think, one of the UK's biggest employer of apprentices. We employ 700 every year. And increasingly, they're less graduate trainees. They're increasingly apprentices straight from school, like myself. And then, you know, one of the things that I got exposed to in Sweden, and I've now continued that back in BT, is all of the executives used to, there was a a Luma program at Tele2, and they were called the Luma because they put the lights on in the morning and they put the lights off at night. And the executive committee hired each executive committee member had a Luma every year. And that was a graduate, a highly ambitious graduate straight from school. And that individual would shadow and basically be the chief of staff for that executive for a year. And then they would move on. Then they would have to find their job in the company afterwards. So that individual would just shadow you for the whole year, do everything for you, do your scripts, do your CEO reports, run the board meetings. I then took that to Denmark. So, and I've accrued, I think, 10, and actually eight of them were women, 2 of them were men. And I've accrued them over the years. They've all gone on to do great things, and I'm still their mentor.
That's amazing.
And so we do something similar at BT.
I was going to ask,
the
did you
same,
bring that to BT?
but then it was slightly different. But what we decided, it was a graduate on one of the rotations, and this year we chose an apprentice, who is, and so Abu is shadowing me for a year, sits in the monthly business reviews, gets exposure to the board. And it's a great way of just, because actually a lot of what you learn is by watching and seeing other leaders. And those apprentices or trainees that work alongside an executive for their first year coming out of university get brilliant exposure of the human side of leadership as well as the business side of leadership. And that's such an important skill.
It's hugely important.
So, and then, in BT as well, we do a lot and certainly working in tech, we believe, technology is a great leveler if used appropriately. So we have, 14% of our workforce are disabled. And we recruit a lot of neurodiverse individuals, particularly into cybersecurity. And some of the more academic side of technology, where you have brilliant minded people that they have a very different type of brilliance than maybe I'm more socially brilliant than maybe academically and neurodiverse brilliant, but we do a lot of that as well in our recruitment. So we're big believers in diversity.
Yeah, and actually a couple of weeks ago we were in Berlin, and you were you received very justifiably the Diversity and Inclusion Award. So congratulations on that. And what you've told a couple of practical steps, like the Luma or the equivalent, the shadowing and bringing people, the reflecting your the communities you serve in your workforce. What other practical steps have you seen that help people to succeed to leadership positions? And do you think, as one of the, I think there are 5 female CEOs, that we have enough diversity at the top of organizations?
Yeah. I think, for women in particular, or parents in particular, you need to set up the support mechanisms and the systems that allow them to be able to juggle those early days of being a mother or a father, so that they don't fall off the ladder. And I was lucky to be at an organization like Procter & Gamble that really, really believed in giving flexibility to talent. Because they were a promote from within culture, they couldn't afford to lose talent when they all went off to have babies. So, almost 27 years ago, I was allowed to work 4 days a week for a year. My boss thought I was crazy taking a 20% salary cut. He said, "You'll just do the 5 days and 4. I went, "But I don't mind. It gives me that extra day." So, 27 years ago, I was allowed to do 4 days. Then when I was offered the chance to do investor relations and M&A, my baby was 3 months old. This is my second child, and they wanted me to go to Cincinnati for 6 months. I said, "I'm not going to do that. I'll maybe come for a couple of months, but then I'm bringing my mother, I'm bringing my baby, and you'll need to fly out the 6-year-old at some point." And they were willing to, so they offered flexibility to support me. And so, you know, we've now brought in eco-parental care at BT. We've done that in the last year. That's been, you know, very well received. Carers leave, you know, we have, it's not, you know, we have a workforce that also have moved beyond the child care and to adult care. So we give carers leave as well. So it's building the support mechanisms.
Yeah.
Having the networks. We have at BT lots of networks, whether it be female networks, the disabled networks, the different ethnicity networks, so that people feel they have people that understand their situations. And and each of us at the EXCO takes a different community to take responsibility for during the year.
And you do target your senior executives on this area?
Yeah, we do include, we took away DE&I as an annual bonus target, which we got, and we did that ahead of what happened in the US, and we got beaten up by that. But what did not get into the public domain was we moved to inclusion. All of our managers now have their own personal KPIs, and inclusion is within that. So we really believe in inclusivity, because you can set targets for diversity, but if you don't make people feel included, have a voice, and have the chance to speak up, then you're never going to get the best out of that individual and get the value from driving an inclusive, diverse workforce. So we very much believe in that.
And well, two things. One is that CEO, I think you're talking about, Chris de la Puente.
Yes.
And when I was a divorced single mother, I needed flexibility because I was going through a divorce, and he gave it to me. And ever since then, I've been a huge proponent of working from home, well before the pandemic.
Yes.
So that flexibility I completely endorse, and CMI has always been a flexible working place.
And 3-2 very much helps, you know, the neurodiverse and certain disabled communities from maybe having those extra days where they just need to be able to work from home. So
absolutely.
I also believe in the power of coming together, though. So
yes, and
it has to be the right mix.
I'm going to ask about those working patterns. But the other thing that you mentioned, which I'm curious, and I'm sure people would be curious if you can share, is it's great you're targeting your senior executives on their ability to be inclusive. Now, how are you measuring that?
Surveys, you know, every day, the quarterly Your Say survey actually asks the question about, do you feel included? And if you're a part, and then if you register that you're part of a particular minority group, then you're also asked questions about the minority group that you're a part of as well. So, and that dials up to both your leader and the team that you work in.
And what do you do with the ones that don't do so well on that? What do you say to them?
You have to work with them, and then where it's clearly driving a toxic environment, you have to take action. It was very interesting. You know, when I arrived at BT, I was on the board for 5 years before I became the CEO. So I knew we had pockets of toxicity in the company. You know, we are a microcosm of the UK, so we have some of the issues that the UK has. And there was a frustration in the board that some of that had been allowed to continue. And it was very interesting, as the first female CEO, it was almost expected on me that I would fix it because I was a minority. And it did, you know, and there was a couple of very senior leader situations that had been accepted for years. And suddenly there was a wave of whistleblowing. And HR did say to me, you are going to have to fix this because they expect it of you. And I'm kind of like, well, why didn't they expect it of my predecessor? Now, because of what I learned through the whistleblowing, it was very easy for me to say, no, this person has to go. But then when you discover how badly managed that person, or some of the people, had not had the feedback over the years. And so the company was in a very difficult situation because they'd never given the individual feedback, although everybody knew and just accepted that that's how it was. So I said, no, it has to stop. And
You get a lot of credit for doing that.
yeah, but it was interesting. They expected it of me because I was a woman, whereas kind of my predecessor, they kind of just accepted that it wasn't going to get solved.
Yeah,
But that allowed people to start to speak up and
Yes.
made them feel safe that it would be solved. And
Well,
then you have to do it in a way that you protect those that are whistleblowing.
well, of course. And actually, well, this is touching on something which is culture, right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest shapers of culture is how you handle toxicity, right?
Yes.
Because everybody knows, as you said, what's going on. And if it's tolerated, it sends the message that's okay around here.
Yeah.
So how important do you think culture is? And maybe we can come back to that, your thoughts on, and how has it been influenced and affected by hybrid work culture, and your thoughts on that?
Listen, I think culture, there are two things that leaders have to really own. It's the strategy and it's the culture. And I think we've all had the experience of working in strong cultures, good cultures and bad cultures. And I think, you know, when you spend 20 years at a company like P&G, where everybody has all the same values, the same purpose, the same mission,
Same language.
the same language, you don't need to work on culture because it's ingrained. And that's why a lot of people actually, when they leave an environment like that, struggle elsewhere because the culture is not the same. And it's only when you've gone into organizations with weak cultures, you start to really understand that culture does eat strategy for breakfast. And I think I learned a lot in my first Scandinavian telco, Tele2, which had a very strong challenger culture. It was founded by basically the Richard Branson of Scandinavia, a man called Jan Stenbeck. And he really believed in the customer and the challenger spirit, in openness, very Scandinavian. And they actually, as leaders, we were always training what the culture was to our organization. We were always talking about culture. We had annual awards where we recognized people for the best culture, carriers and the culture champions. So every organized, and I went there after a couple of bad cultural experiences. So when I go into, ever since Tele2, every company I've gone into afterwards, I really spend time understanding the good, the bad, and the ugly of the culture, and then work with the organization on shaping what the culture needs to evolve to be if it's not quite perfect, or nurturing if it is perfect. And that's what we're in the midst of here at BT as well, because BT has lots of subcultures, but as we head towards becoming a much more UK-centric business with a one-team spirit, I'm really having to work on that culture to make it one that is much more customer-centric and much more performance-driven. And so that is, you have to keep working on culture, because when the culture goes, you're never going to achieve what you want to achieve. You asked me a second part to that question, and I've now forgotten.
And how does the new hybrid pattern of working fit into that, and what are your views?
So we had already started to move to flexible working before COVID. And then COVID was a great excuse for a lot of people to do a reset of their lives. And we have struggled to get people back to the office, despite having 3 together, 2 whatever as a policy, which I think is a lovely policy. It was a guidance. It wasn't a policy. 4 yeyears in, we were averaging 1.7 days a week in the office. Now, Some of that is also because we've been going through a phase of shutting down a lot. We had 300 disparate offices, and we're moving towards 30 core offices. So some people have had to change their travel times and everything. But 1.7 days a week in the office, when we're actually going through one of the biggest transformations the company has ever gone on, And we recruit a lot, we recruit a lot of new people every year. We have a lot of frontline people. If they're field engineers, they're out in the field 5 days a week. We have store people in the stores 5 days a week. We have call center people in the call centers 5 days a week. It just doesn't feel right that the manager population were not in the offices, because the managers are there to lead, to coach, to develop. That's how I learn. I learn by watching the leaders around me. And so I think we've all had to work on how do you sustain or actually evolve a culture to be better when people don't come together often enough. What does that culture become when all you see is your manager sitting in their kitchen? And if it's not a very tidy kitchen, you start to have an opinion on that person. And they clearly tidy desk, tidy kitchen's okay, but messy kitchen says a lot about how that person thinks. Anyway, so our younger generations want to be in the office. They want to learn. They learn through experiences, not just doing stuff and having a Teams call afterwards. And so I fundamentally believe that we have to get to 3-2 as a minimum. Because we will never achieve what we need to achieve because of the scale of change that we're going on. Co-creation, collaboration is all important for innovation and change.
Of course it is.
And that only really truly happens when you come together. And I think the world is starting to we all need to be connected, and we all rely on technology nowadays. But the best brands and the best experiences have both the human touch that is tech enabled. And that's what we've got to have in how we develop leaders, as well as how we spend time with our customers.
And, I have to frame this. You're saying 3 together, 2 wherever. You're not saying 5 days in or you're done.
No, we're
right.
not.
And I think that is reasonable. It's also clear that many people value some degree of flexibility in.
And going back to, building a diverse, inclusive workplace, that flexibility allows you to handle, whether it be a young mother or a disabled colleague or somebody that just really can't cope, being in the office 5 days a week because it's just too much for them. So I think all the data says 3-2 is the sweet spot. But I think as time evolves, we'll need to work out whether that really works in all domains. And I think there will be some domains that will be, it will have to be 5 days, but there'll be some, like developers and coders, probably not necessarily 3 days. So
Now you've had some bad cultures. It is very true that women in particular, and I know I've shared my own journey with you, can hit a wall, right? They have a bad experience, they hit a wall, they feel quite vulnerable. And it can be difficult to, climb out of that. What's your experience there, and how did you cope with times that things didn't perhaps go so well?
Because of my background, my job it's all, sadly for me, although I love it, work is really important to me. It has defined me. It has given me an amazing life. And I wouldn't put that on everybody, but that is just me. That is Allison. And I went, I had 20 odd years of it just all went very well, and everything I did.
And people said, hey, you're doing a great job, Allison.
I had a support network around me when I did have the odd failure, but then I did get into an environment, and this was at a stage where my husband had started to take a bit of a back step to support the family. So I was the major breadwinner. I was paying the mortgage, everything. And I did hit a wall, and I took it very, very personally and badly. I did become 10 kilos smaller, which was quite nice. And I did manage to run the London Marathon as well, because I was just kind of, what am I going to do with my life? And, you know, I found it very traumatic. But I got a coach. Luckily, as part of the exit, I got a great coach who really worked with me to understand, one, why I had taken it so badly. And she worked out it was because the first time I'd actually really failed. And then she really worked out why failure for me was much more difficult than, because it was, you know, work helped me escape from a dying father. Work helped me escape from possibly seeing my life working in a factory for the rest of my life. So it was so instrumental. But then she really worked with me on understand, you know, kind of what was it that went wrong in the role, and really worked on not just what were the bits that you'd kind of maybe got wrong in the job, but actually what was the role of relationships in the failure. And then, so really helped me then work on what kind of environments was going to get the best out of Allison in the future, what kind of environments to avoid, and also made me really think thoughtfully about relationships going forward. I think that's, you know, we all have imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome because I've never gone to university. As you develop and grow as a leader, you realize a lot of your success or failure is in how you have badly or successfully managed a relationship. And so she, you know, luckily she really understood the environment I'd been in. I wasn't the first one to fail. I wasn't the last one either. But that really, really helped. And it helped just put it all in context.
Yeah,
well.
and maybe not blame yourself.
And not blame yourself. But because I'm kind of this achiever that has to achieve, you know, when I am failing in certain things, then I go and do crazy things like run a marathon or cycle from Vietnam to Cambodia or cycle from, my poor husband.
Okay,
but that coaching, and then, so, you know, now I find as a CEO, you know, you can have a board is there to support, but a board also has to be independent at times. So having the safe harbor of mentors or people in your network that you can have those trusted conversations with. And generally with my mentor now, he's an amazing man, Sir Roger Carr, who's gone through a lot of experiences. I'm generally asking him about the people dynamics, either the people dynamics of the changes I need to make to my own team, or the people dynamics in the board, or people dynamics with shareholders and government. And that is something, as we grow as leaders, you need to keep thinking about how you develop those relationships and spot when they're not going well.
I think that's so important because if you reflect and, you know, on as you did on your failures, and this is, I think, true for all of us, they're very rarely down to decisions, business decisions. They're down to relationships
and how you've managed a certain situation.
Yeah. So I think that's very, very sage advice. And I think that does cover, because I know we want to get to audience questions. I think it does cover my question on failure. But I think I have to ask before we get to audience questions, the advice that you would give to somebody who's maybe just starting out, or maybe a middle manager, or I often get asked, how do I break through and become a great leader or even a CEO? What would you tell them?
Be brave enough to put yourself out of your comfort zone on a regular basis, because you only learn and grow by being tested, or being curious, or being tested in new environments. And if you're, you know, if you become comfortable, you don't grow and develop. And so, because you know, one of my mottos in life is to have a dream and make it come true. And that dream just got bigger and bigger and bigger. I've always kind of said, well, why not? If she can or he can, why can't I? And so I've regularly put myself out of my comfort zone. I've been lucky to be in environments. I've had a support network around me so that if apart from the one time we just spoke about, but, you know, just getting out of your comfort zone so that you can learn and develop and have therefore a little bit of edge about your story. You know, my story became more interesting because, you know, I was in Romania between the Bosnian and Kosovan wars and, you know, discovered the distributor was paying off the Bulgarian mafia. My story became more interesting because I was doing investor relations and M&A in Cincinnati when P&G decided to do the 50 billion acquisition of Gillette, where my story became more interesting because I didn't get the Man United job, but I thought Stockholm's a nicer city to live in anyway than Manchester. I'll go to Stockholm and I'll come home at the weekend to my family. And just, you know, kind of, I was out of my comfort zone on all of those, but it just made me a little bit more interesting. And managers, they need to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah.
So make yourself interesting.
That's great advice. Wow. Right. Questions. Now we do have a mic, and you were very fast with your hand right there.
Hi. Does it work? Natasha Calla, Moonpig Group. Thank you so much for everything that you've just said. I found every second of that really interesting, and a lot of it's resonated. So thank you for sharing. You're clearly someone with a lot of drive, a lot of energy, and really kind of fueled by work and everything that you can get out of that. If you ever find yourself in a room with people who aren't like that, with people who are thinking this is just a job, this is what I come home from, not to, it's not my mortgage, you know, kind of no sweat. How do you kind of get more out of those people, knowing that you're not that way inclined? How do you get people on the journey with you?
Well, first of all, when I'm in a room of people with maybe disinterested, disaffected, not full of energy, I'm very interested in understanding why. And so trying to draw out why did they come into the company in the first place? What makes them stay? What is it you don't like about it that you don't want to give that back? You have to understand first, because maybe there is a lot of stuff going on in those people's lives. And I don't expect everyone to be like me, because I am a little bit bonkers. And we all view work-life balance very differently. My husband would rather be on the water sailing than being at work. And that's just, first of all, it's just trying to understand, and then understanding, well, is the person happy? Are they happy and content in what they're doing? If they're happy and content and they make it work, that's fine. But if it's somebody that's very ambitious, so I give my daughter a hard time when she's like, well, I want to work from the office. So I don't want to work from the office on a Thursday or a Friday. I'm like, Emily, you know, if you want to be successful, you have to get to the bloody office, you know. I'm a hard driving mother as well. But it's just understanding, and then understanding how much of it is the individual and how much of it is the environment they're in or the environment that they're coping with outside. And then I always just try to inject energy, particularly if it's a work environment. I do see myself as, you know, I am the company I represent, and I need to energize my colleagues, my customers, my owners, and the stakeholders that we service. I need to make them proud. And so if it's a group of colleagues in BT, I feel a sense of responsibility to re-energize them and then solve whatever is getting in the way of them feeling energized about the future of the company.
So there's a lot of listening and being curious involved in that. Next question right here.
Thank you very much. I'm Natalie Sons, and I help organizations to drive value through the power of kindness. And I'm really interested in what you said about relationships, and in particular, how are you seeking to promote, as you said, how important relationships are with your youngest colleagues, you know, the apprentices, the grads, et cetera, coming through the business, who maybe in this day and age are lacking some of these skills. What are you trying to do to help them see the value of the relationships and actually grow those skills?
So first of all, the various networking opportunities that we provide, but really ensuring my managers that are managing them are creating inclusive workplaces for those people to develop and grow. Back to Anne's earlier point, we actually measure our manager population on inclusivity. So that is absolutely the key thing. You know, I also have to have a very tricky balance. BT today has 115,000 workforce. We will, by the end of the decade, be a much smaller workforce. We will reduce by 40 to 50,000. I have to be very transparent with people, work with unions and the organization on, we're creating a better BT, but it's going to be a much smaller company in the future. So that requires me to be very kind and fair in how we reduce the workforce and work with reskilling, outsourcing, re-employment as well. And it does require that transparency piece. And I've got to do a better job of ensuring that all my managers can do that as well. Because I think we have as a company, and I think this has happened in a lot of companies over many years, and the public sector, we've not invested in our manager skills. So we were lucky to have been taught great manager leadership skills at P&G, and engaging and energizing was part of the 5 E's of leadership. We've got to get that into our manager population nowadays, because it's not there as consistently as it used to be.
And this is where I plug CMI.
Exactly.
Right?
I did
you
that
know, you
for
do
you.
that. Thank you, Allison. Yes, you do need to invest in training those line managers, getting them chartered, and then they will be inclusive. And actually, it's true that trained managers are more inclusive. Walking the Walk, our latest report, demonstrates this. Meanwhile, we have a question from Joe, and
then one at the back.
Then there's one in the back. So we'll go to Joe, and then one in the back, and then I do have to give a couple of online people an opportunity, because we have an online audience, and then I'll come back to the audience for our last question.
Alison, firstly, thank you so much. Really authentic, and you just come across as so genuine in terms of genuine leadership. So really brilliant to see that in action. I suppose my question is, if we're thinking, 5 years out, and it's almost impossible to think 1 year out, what are the things that there's lots of noise, there's lots of things that compete for attention at the moment. If you're running an organization, where do you really think you should focus your time and energy? What's the advice?
It's a wonderful question. You've got to, first and foremost, it's making yourself very aware of, particularly for us, where is technology taking this industry and this business, and how might you be disrupted at any point in time. But actually, I've got to spend a lot of time understanding how are we serving our customers in a modern day age, and how is technology changing that? How do I differentiate through both technology and human capacity? So the mix is externally understanding where we're going, and internally understanding how do you take the organization with you to be able to better serve your customers in the future, with technology at the heart of that. Now, AI plays a role as I look into the future. AI plays a role into how it's going to disrupt how people do their jobs. because it will be very, very different in the future. But I'll only have a view on that if I understand what it's like day to day for my people that are serving our customers today as well. So, and then, so that's kind of the two big things. And then I think because the world is changing so fast, and because we probably went through an era of everything was kind of stable. Remember those days? It wasn't that long ago, pre-COVID. Yeah. How do you start to build resilience in your leaders that have maybe not had the same, you know, I got resilience through how I grew up, how I, you know, was in the Balkans in the mid-90s when it was all a bit crazy. How do you build that resilience and experience set in your organization so that they can face up to all of the challenges ahead too? But for me, it's still a lot of what I have to do today is still really understanding what are the changing needs of my customers and how am I better serving them in the future?
That's a great question. Thank you. There was one more in the back, and then Michael, there I know that there's some online, and I want to give our online audience
running a company
an
like
opportunity.
BT, I spent a lot of time with government as well, which was quite different from Scandinavia, actually.
Or if there wasn't
sorry.
one in the back, go to
Yeah.
the online one. Thank you. Or, oh, sorry, was there one? I couldn't see the hand.
Yeah.
Oh, there, you've got the mic. Sorry.
Oh.
Is the mic, right.
Hello.
Oh, there it is.
Hi, thank you,
Hi.
Alison. Really appreciate hearing about your journey. Very interesting. I'm Kate. I'm a chief of staff at IBM, and I just wanted to
An important partner to us.
right, just from the similar to the previous question, I guess, but in terms of the time management and just the different demands on your time that you have as a CEO, how do you manage different priorities, but also how do you approach delegation? And do you do anything personally in terms of in your rituals, in terms of reflections, bringing together your team for honest conversations? How do you approach that piece?
Yeah, so we meet as a team every Monday, and one Monday a month, it's a whole day where we try to spend on strategy and culture, actually, and then we always hang out together that evening. That was a new thing that was introduced. The team I stepped into had, in 5 years, only ever spent one evening together informally. So I've had to work on the team that I inherited quite a lot, and I've made some changes to that team as you would naturally expect as well. You know, my time management kind of gets managed. I always want to ensure I've got regular time out of the headquarters. So, you know, at least twice a month, I am out at other sites. Next week, I'm in India for the whole week. We have 15,000 employees in India. So I'll be Bangalore, Delhi, and Calcutta in a week. So I'll be exhausted after that, but I'll be totally energized by them. So I always make sure that time out with the organization is put into the calendar before that, and the monthly rhythm of business reviews, board meetings, they go into the calendar first and foremost. And then my team makes sure I've got the right mix of customer facing, government interaction. Government kind of don't give you a lot of notice and you get called in, but my priority is the running of the business through the weekly meetings with my team, through the business reviews and the strategy sessions, and then getting out with my people. And then everything else gets slotted in around that. And I think because I worked away from my family for 10 years, I do feel Monday to Friday very full. I use evenings to catch up with team members or, you know, key partners or customers. But then I collapse at the weekend. And weekends and holidays
well deserved.
Our family time.
So we're almost out of time, but I have to let the online community one question which Michael's going to choose.
Okay, we have a question from Heather Connery. There seems to be a lot of great stuff happening for those in early careers. However, I have found that there isn't much helping people 10 plus years in their career. What can be offered for those in the middle?
Yep, great question. We've actually got a few particular programs running at BT that I'm really proud of. There's the Returners program. So we bring back generally women that have left the workforce, left from BT to go and have children or look after elderly parents. So we have a proactive returners program. In some of our call centres now, we have a program to bring people that took early retirement from the police force or other places back into, and they do flexible working in our call centres, and they are brilliant at handling billing questions for the elderly. You know, if you've got an ex-policeman, so we've got a very proactive program there as well. We have a veterans program. So we're very proud of, we recruit the most amount of veterans outside of the public sector. And there you bring in great leaders that have, worked in service. So we've got a number of programs. I think some of the reskilling we're doing, Sage, the software company based out of Newcastle, a lot of their apprenticeships now are for the 50 plus age group.
Yeah.
And they've really invested in that group. So I think we all need to be a bit more creative. We all, but it helps when you have an ambition to have a workforce that's as diverse as the customers you serve, because then actually you do need that mix of mature, experienced individuals just as much as you need the youngsters.
Brilliant.
And we're all going to be working until we're 80 soon. So.
Exactly. So unfortunately, Allison has to dash. She's spent a wonderful time with us, and thank you for listening. Thank you for all your questions. And I think you get a very well-deserved round of applause. Thank you for joining us. And if you enjoyed this, I have to plug the next two. We have Matt Britton coming up,
who's
the outgoing
wonderful man,
CEO of Google EMEA, and Greg Jackson, the founder and CEO of Octopus Energy. So
another wonderful man.
There you go. So the dates will be forthcoming. But thank you for joining us. A huge thank you to Allison. She now gets to go not sell some cream, but eat some cream and cakes and celebrate the 4th of
the July 4th party. So, yes, but it's not July 4th. So, thank you.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.